On Monday, President Donald Trump showed his first signs of retreat since sending a surge of federal immigration agents to Minnesota late last year. He replaced the leader of the crackdown on the ground and signaled a willingness to cooperate more closely with the state's Democratic officials. The move came amid efforts to contain backlash following the fatal shooting of Alex Pretti and earlier attempts by Trump officials to label the ICU nurse a domestic terrorist. However, the administration's attempts to shift blame continued, raising questions about how much would actually change on the ground. The first test could come Tuesday, when Border Patrol Chief Gregory Bovino and some of his agents are expected to leave the city, according to three sources familiar with the discussions. Trump dispatched border czar Tom Homan to oversee the on-the-ground operation that had stirred unrest in Minneapolis. Sidelining Bovino could signal a move away from the heavy-handed tactics he had promoted. The leadership change was welcomed by some at the Department of Homeland Security, who see Homan as a more experienced hand, and also drew praise from GOP leaders on Capitol Hill. Some White House officials, including Trump, had grown frustrated with the public perception of the administration's immigration efforts even before Pretty's killing on Saturday. On Monday, Trump spoke with Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, setting aside their long-standing feud to discuss better coordination and the possible withdrawal of some federal agents. "It was a very good call, and we actually seem to be on a similar wavelength," Trump wrote on Truth Social, referring to the governor he had recently called corrupt and grossly incompetent. Later, he also spoke with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey, describing the conversation as very good and noting that lots of progress is being made. Together, these moves marked the first public acknowledgement by the White House of an operation that has led to daily clashes with protesters and violent incidents, unsettling even some administration officials and close Trump allies. "You're going to have mistakes, you're going to have messiness, but I think Homeland Security probably hasn't handled it as well as it could have," said Mark Krikorian, executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, criticizing the initial portrayal of Pretti as the aggressor. After Pretty's death, Republican lawmakers and allies raised objections both publicly and privately, warning that the crisis could undermine the administration's broader immigration agenda and damage the party politically. Continuing such enforcement could overshadow efforts to amplify the election fraud narrative that initially prompted the surge and complicate Trump's wider agenda. Senate Democrats have threatened to oppose a funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security, raising the prospect of a government shutdown. Several GOP lawmakers, including Trump allies, have called for investigations into the shooting, and some have pushed for congressional hearings. Politicians, protesters, and law enforcement all have an obligation to de-escalate the situation in Minnesota, Rep. Dusty Johnson of South Dakota wrote on X. As with any officer-involved shooting, this demands a thorough investigation. Administration officials also shifted away from portraying Pretti as a gun-wielding attacker, while still maintaining he invited the fatal encounter. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt said Trump had not labeled Pretti a domestic terrorist, though other officials had suggested he fit the definition. She noted federal agencies are investigating the shooting. Leavitt, however, blamed Democrats and local protesters for creating a combustible environment that led to federal agents shooting Renee Good earlier this month and now Pretti. This tragedy occurred as a result of deliberate and hostile resistance by Democrat leaders in Minnesota, she said, naming Walz and Frey specifically. The attempt to moderate rhetoric while avoiding direct blame highlights the administration's challenge in managing a volatile situation that threatens Trump's integration agenda. Public support for ICE tactics has been declining, even among those who backed initial border security efforts. A CNN poll earlier this month found 56% viewed the use of force against Good as inappropriate, compared to 26% who called it appropriate. Some GOP lawmakers on Capitol Hill see Homan's appointment as a move to stabilize an operation that had become counterproductive under Noem and Bovino. "This is a positive development, one that I hope leads to turning down the temperature and restoring order in Minnesota," Senate Majority Leader John Thune wrote on X. Homan, a veteran ICE official known for a tough approach to illegal immigration, tends to favor more targeted operations rather than broad sweeps. He's scheduled to meet with Walls and Frey, though it remains unclear how tactics might change. The White House has emphasized the need for greater state and local cooperation in deportations, while the governor and mayor say they are already coordinating with federal officials. Homan's most immediate task will be easing tensions on the ground, which have accumulated over weeks and drawn national scrutiny as opposition to Trump's deportation campaign grows. Every day is election day in a sense. You can't just say we won on this platform and now we can do whatever we want for the next 2 years, Krikorian said. If people don't like it, you've got to keep persuading them.